Fundamentally, we look at it through the lens of education and again, trying to motivate just that first step of, in our case, enroll in your retirement plan, depending on where you are in the journey. And if you're further than that and you're doing a good job with the savings, then what's the next thing you really need to think about? And
Welcome to the Press One for Nick podcast. My name is Nick Limsdahl, and my guest this week is Jessica Austin Barker. She is the Chief Digital and Client Experience Officer at TIAA. Jessica leads TIAA's digital transformation, focusing on creating client-first experiences that simplify the path to retirement for millions of Americans. Her vision is centered on rethinking how TIAA serves its clients, making interactions seamless and advice-driven, all while fostering a client-centric culture. Before joining TIAA, Jessica spent over 2 decades at Intuit, where she played a pivotal role in reshaping customer experiences for popular products like TurboTax, QuickBooks, and Credit Karma. As the VP of Consumer Group Customer Experience at Intuit, she led efforts to boost customer experience success and retention for TurboTax. However, we're going to stay focused on the current job today. One thing I'm most excited about is just kind of digging in, the history of TIAA's mission to start. But, how has TIAA's mission influenced your approach to fostering maybe that customer obsession, especially maybe in the context of a company with over 100 years of history?
hi, well, good to see you. And yes, TIAA is definitely a unique place. It was started over 100 years ago, a financial services company dedicated to helping individuals retire with confidence. And the mission you mentioned, it's a very mission-centric organization, really with its roots in nonprofit and serving institutions such as higher education, healthcare that are nonprofit organizations, so that we could put a secure retirement within the reach of millions of Americans. So this has been the mission for far longer than I have been here. And the way that we've started thinking about this idea of customer obsession is how do we turn our mission obsession into sort of that customer obsession so that really you can activate against the mission in new ways. And as you know, that starts internally with how we build our culture and the people and the focus that we would have on our clients. And so, we've been really focused on, I'll give you just a few examples of what we mean by sort of customer obsession and where we've been focused. Classically, I think it very much starts with first being clear on your customers, the classic, your customers, their needs, where are we at in meeting those? And of course, what do we aspire to do beyond that? But really getting deep into that rooting of organizing teams around customer problem to allow them to focus on how then they go and solve those problems. And beyond that, and we can talk more about this, but we're of course doing a lot to then build underlying capabilities. So I think in the simplest form, it started with, do we have the skills to build great client experience? Do we have the culture that is really wrapping around this client-centric ways of working and practices? And then do we have the capabilities, like you mentioned, and how we are trying to advance, in particular, our digital experiences. As you can imagine, a 100-year-old company, we had a little bit of client experience and tech debt that we have been rounding the corner on.
Yeah, 100 years, there was no tech debt, so you had to start somewhere.
Yes.
But I think that speaks to the volume of the organization, though. I mean, a lot of organizations aren't around for 20 years, let alone 100. So kudos to you guys on that. You know, uh, One of the things that I see organizations fail at from a CX perspective is they're not aligning it with that mission, with the vision, with the values, with specifically business outcomes. So maybe touch on that just a little bit. What are you guys doing to making sure that the C-suite's happy, the shareholders are happy, but you're also aligning it with what you want to achieve from the CX perspective?
Yeah, what's really exciting is I think the synergy between our mission and client health metrics, if you will. So one of our primary metrics is around what we call our mission metric, and it's really a measurement of um, are our participants, which in our case are, we're a business to business, a B2B to C. So we're serving institutional clients. In other words, if you're an employee of XYZ university, they may then leverage our retirement plans and services. So in that context, we have a measurement called our mission metric, which is to really understand what percent of those participants that we're serving are on track and exhibiting on track behaviors for secure retirement. And when you sort of peel that apart, the components of that are they saving enough? How are they managing that investment? And then are they protected so that they can have enough lifetime income? In other words, an annual paycheck that's going to cover their basic needs as long as they live. So what I love about that in your question is the establishment of this mission metric ultimately ties to our purpose, but also why the customer, if you will, has hired us, why the institution has hired us, ultimately to help prepare them and being on track for their retirement.
The one thing that I really like is it's not saying, here's your big, hairy, audacious goal. Now let's collectively work our way there. But it's also what you were saying about what behaviors are they putting in place to have the highest probability of success.
Yes.
And I think there's so many organizations, not just in customer experience or customer service or financial for that matter, but that you could focus on those mission metrics, but also the behavioral metrics. Are your customers, are your clients, are your employees meeting those behavioral metrics to ultimately achieve the things that they maybe didn't think that they could achieve because it is in their control, but they just have to take the micro approach to ultimately reach the macro. Anything else you want to say on that?
Yeah, when you were asking that, it made me think about if I speak a little more about this idea of helping people get on track for their retirement goals and retirement readiness. That micro point is so important because, as it is otherwise when you start off, it seems unachievable to ever be able to get to a place where you could be able to retire. And so when we think about even how we look at the component of saving enough, we are digging deeper underneath that and looking at, I'll give sort of analogy. Are you using maybe moving from an F to a D to a C? And instead of trying to assume you're going to go from an F to an A overnight, and that's what we keep putting in front of you is you're here, hurry up and get here. How we can encourage people and we're measuring and understanding, are they moving toward that A and the amount that they ought be saving? And I think that that's just, a really next level down example of, to your point, you can't just put this BHAG out there and get everybody there overnight. This is it's a long journey that we have with customers in the context of preparing for retirement and those behaviors over a lifetime. So absolutely, and maybe that's kind of what you mean. That's an example of how we're moving through that. And I think it's so important because, part of the reason I joined was, as you know, America, it's really a financial crisis. And as it stands today, about 40% of the US households are going to run out of money in retirement. And it's even more bleak when you look at it through the lens of women and certain diverse populations. So, it's going to take us all to solve this problem.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Is there a what's the best way you're talking about this crisis. What's
Mhm.
the best way to educate the masses, if it's women or minorities or just people in general, on running that marathon for their financial freedom per se, to get where they want to go? Is it just a here's how to check your credit score, here's how to increase that credit score, here's how to plan and balance a checkbook? Maybe it starts at the very beginning, at the elementary school level. But I'm sure that you guys have a plan in place. But just out of curiosity, like, to tackling the crisis seems like a BHAG in its own. How do you guys go about that?
Yeah, as you know, that is a big question and there's a lot in there. And I think fundamentally, we look at it through the lens of education and advice. And so, yes, to your point, depending on where a participant is in the journey, and meeting them where they're at on that early education. And again, trying to motivate just that first step of, in our case, enroll in your retirement plan and make sure that you're getting your match from your employer, because that is, if you will, free money, just that
Yeah.
first step. So depending on where you are in the journey, and if you're further than that and you're doing a good job with the saving, then what's the next thing you really need to think about? And then we're working with you on that investment allocation. So it does very much depend on someone's acumen, where they are in the journey.
Yeah.
But starting off with that education and, you know, how do we help get more relational so that you can help drive that engagement, that motivation? And I think, no one has figured this out in full, or we probably wouldn't be here yet, be here today with the 40% challenge.
Yeah.
But the way that I like to think about it, it's highly emotional, as you know, and I think the tactics that we use and the language that we use, and the empathy and compassion we can show versus making people feel judged and behind, and that it's an impossible task, I think is part of the how, if you will, that we'll get that unlock. And then for us in particular, we also have the benefit of working with these institutions, our clients, which are, I'll go back to the example in the nonprofit sector, which is who we serve, a university. And what's lovely is we have shared goals. They want to be a great employer, make sure that their employees are set up for success to retire, that they can retire people, from the institution. And so we also are really working through them. So not only do we work in what we can do in the digital context to educate and drive advice, we also are working literally on campuses, with advisors that are there on campus, through our partners, in the HR offices, to even help educate them down at their level of their employee base. How are people doing in regards to that mission metric progress? Are there folks, if they take a look at Nick, take a look at Jessica, how are they doing? Do they need to save more? Are they not meeting the match? Do they need to take a look at that investment, et cetera? So that we're leveraging them as a trusted source as well. Because again, they very much want to provide great benefits and help their employees be ready to retire with dignity. So I really love the opportunity that we have to both work direct with the participant, but also leveraging that trusted relationship and bringing the insights to their employer to help, again, double down on that education advice on campus and through them.
Yeah, it's sound advice, and I appreciate you kind of digging in to the big crazy question I provided. But one of the questions I have, just bringing it all back together, is what innovations in financial advice, which we've talked about, has TIAA introduced, maybe in the digital side, to simplify that process of saving for retirement?
Yeah, I would say, we're early on the journey. I have been here a couple of years, and as I mentioned, we had some client experience in tech debt to dig out of. And as we're rounding the corner, a few things that I'm really excited about, I'll just thematically talk about, is one, historically in the industry, I think there's been a real separation of thinking about digital and then thinking about human-led or assisted as sort of just distinct and different channels. And one of the areas that we're exploring is that hybrid, the opportunity to unlock sort of the two together, to both meet different and evolving customer needs, but also recognize that someone may have confidence up into a point with self-serve and digital, but then is going to need that bridge to maybe make a one-way decision, or what seems like a meaningful decision to them, need that more personalized touch from an advisor or an expert. So taking analogs from other industries and applying that here, so that we aren't thinking siloed in channels about how we serve our customers, for me, is one big area that we are working through now. I think the second area, of innovation for us, and it's really very much in service to particularly our mission, which is to make sure that participants have a lifetime income, which means they have a consistent paycheck in retirement every year, and they will not run out of that, as long as they live, so that they can cover their basic needs. For us, that means innovation in the space of what we call decumulation advice. So as you may know, the market is very, very focused on the accumulation years that we all have to save, 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 save. But like, then what? So this idea around things like income planning and retirement, and understanding sort of this paycheck, retirement paycheck concept and how we bring that to life. We do that today and have historically through our advisors and conversations. We are now trying to really scale that digitally and help elevate that education around, getting people to think beyond just the saving component all their life, but then to understand the criticality of income planning and retirement and how you think about drawing down income and how you ensure you have enough, because longevity, as you know, has increased twofold really in the last several decades. And so we don't want people to outlive their money.
Yeah, one thing that you touched on over the last couple questions was around that it is an emotional decision and that it does take, it's important to build trust and it's important to have a trusted advisor throughout that process. But ultimately, you're talking to another human being,
Mhm.
and they're not just a number. So, you know, what steps has TIAA taken to humanize that digital experience in the financial services to ensure they're both personal and effective?
Yeah, I love that question. So, there's a couple key things that we have been doing. One, it is really elevating our design craft and the ability to think about these digital client experiences as a journey and a very visualized journey. And so we're working on new ways of taking, candidly, what was a little bit transactional and pretty technical and how we were presenting these recommendations and advice and helping you understand your steps you need to take. And really imagining now it's a storybook. And how do we bring you through a journey that helps resonate more with people and gets to your earlier point about how to educate and not make assumptions and get really technical. Also, of course, the classic, how do you have personalization paths? Because we are meeting people on a spectrum of different knowledge bases and needs. And so how do you then adjust for that? So I'd say design and personalization key. The other is connected to something you said, which is the human is trusted, often if they're good at their job, the advisor. What one thing we have been doing as we've been working in the digital space is to sit with and listen to what the human is doing when they're advising so that we can take those insights and apply them in the digital context. Because there, of course, the conversation is fluid. The next level question differs depending on the answer. The way that they overcome certain concerns, worries, address it, humanized. So really, I love that we have our digital teams working with and sitting with, really hearing and viscerally understanding what is that human delivered experience so that we can apply as much of that as possible to build that trust in a digital world.
Yeah, with that digital world, I feel like there's a huge pendulum right now of some people saying, I'm never going to use AI and automation. And some people are saying, full bore AI and automation. And I think there should be potentially a happy middle to maybe having some of the workflows on the back end where it's not customer facing be more automated and some AI stuff for next best actions or things like that. But, maybe talk, if you don't mind, the importance of balancing that automation and that human touch point in the financial industry.
Yeah, we are probably doing very similarly to what you just described, which is right now, we have set up our AI platform, which, and of course, pretty strict policies around its use.
Mhm.
So we're, I'd say, stepping cautiously into this, in particular in our space. There's a lot to want to make sure that we don't get wrong on our customers' behalf. So our first application of AI is around pointing sort of the arrow internally around process inefficiencies and things that could be simplified and better served through leveraging AI. But with respect to how we then use that in the client experience, that is an area where we're definitely exploring different use cases for application, but doing so in a very measured way, for
Yeah.
the obvious reasons that we don't want to impact negatively a customer. So I'd say we're very early on that journey still. And, uh, you know, also watching what's happening out there with others, as probably everyone is, learning from kind of what's working
Mhm.
and where people have fallen into some traps, particularly in the financial services sector. So that's, where we're at is pretty early, doing what we know can unlock some immediate internal value, but just being a little more mindful and thoughtful around the application and the customer experience.
Yeah, I would say that's definitely wise to take it slower than quicker and these types of um, new services. I think they're exciting, but ultimately you have to align it with the outcomes, aligning it with what the experience is from the employee side, and then ultimately driving that experience for the customer. But you don't want any snafus like giving away free SUVs via chatbot or anything like that. But
Well, or just bad advice, right, for your
or just
retirement.
bad
That,
advice.
that's far worse. So yes.
Yeah, yeah. So there's with all of this, there's a plethora of data, and sometimes all data is not necessarily good. It's sometimes it just has to be clean, but um, it's ultimately, is it actionable and what should you do with it? So, I guess my question is, how do you and your team leverage that data and analytics to enhance that retirement planning process for your customers?
Yeah, so I mean, you mentioned it, but first of all, the kind of the basics, at least from my view, when you think about great client experience, you really need to have both the behavioral, quantitative, and the digital context that you're asking to marry up with the qualitative that you do through observational research or you get through, open-ended verbatims that come back through the closed loop. So first things first is looking at the real-time data, the output of how people are using our digital platforms so that we can gain more insight there to dimensionalize the qualitative and help us prioritize, help us uncover new insights, all of that good stuff. I think, you know, beyond that for us, the sweet spot for us still in this context of retirement is getting more and more insights and understanding around those actions I mentioned, which is ultimately to set you up for retirement readiness, the save, manage, protect construct. Applying and looking at data to whether it's for experimentation, so doing experiments and then looking at the result of that to see if our client experience A/B tests help
Mm.
to help to drive an action that is on behalf of that participant with a better outcome. So that's a big source of sort of how we're looking at analytics and data through A/B testing. But also then, as I mentioned, I really do think one of the unlocks for us is what we're doing with our institutional partners and starting to scale visibility there into how their plan is performing through data that is very specific to the construct of their retirement plan, which is fairly complex as we move across the different institutional partners that we work with. But if we can then, and what we're doing now is applying scaled digital dashboards and views into these plan outcomes and how it ultimately is connecting to different segments of their employee population. And are they on track? Are they not? What are some different actions, again, we can partner to take? But that knowledge of leveraging that data to really understand who we need to go better educate, what might be the barriers? Is it access to different platforms? Is it, the need to go and support different languages? What is in the way? But it starts with having that data that you can start to segment and better understand those who you're trying to serve, and ultimately, again, how to get them better moving towards what we ultimately measure, which is their mission metric outcome.
Yeah, and ultimately, as a client, they all have their personal journey, their personal financial quest to get to where they want to go, and they're going to be a little bit different. But with the use of that data, you have that ability to personalize that experience or that journey on their behalf, based off of their behavioral metrics as well. So I do like how you have that ability where it's not just a cookie cutter and you're saying, well, here's where you're at, here's your age, here's when you want to retire. It focuses more on that to create that personal journey, and that ultimately I think creates trust as well. If somebody feels, going back to emotion, if somebody feels overwhelmed in that journey and they don't feel known and valued in that experience, they can easily go to that next organization. So
Yep.
creating that personalized experience builds that trust from that emotional perspective to hopefully uh, get them to be productively uncomfortable to achieve the financial advice that they're hoping to get to. It's the guided journey, right? It's not. I think some people. I have a horror story that I'll share with you sometime, but on the financial side. But it's you're not the hero. The hero of the story is that customer, and so how are you going to guide them through that journey and provide them that peace of mind?
Yep, absolutely. And I think, we're working with this inspiration of the future self, because I think that is one of the biggest obstacles to overcome in retirement, and motivating, especially those that are earlier, in their career, or you're younger, to start to even think about it. And it's tough to think about worrying about your retirement if you can't even see your future self. So those are the
Yeah.
types of kind of design inspirations that we're starting to play with, as this, really putting forward your future self, getting people engaged, and understanding the outcome differences that happen if you take these actions now versus you wait 10, 20 years. And also sort of elevating the awareness of just longevity, and the change now and how long people are living, and the importance now of this concept of lifetime income,
Mm.
so that you don't have to work until you're 90, because you'll be living till you're 100 plus. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't imagine. I mean, as that continues to grow, but um, what key changes have you seen implemented to transform TIAAs into a more maybe customer centric, data driven, digitally minded organization?
Yeah, one of the first things that we did that I just love to share, because it's so viscerally impactful to employees. And again, I really believe all of this starts with your, internally with your employees, with your culture,
Yeah.
this client-centric concept that can be a little squishy, is one of the first things that we did after I arrived, and we really wanted to have people, and it's the classic, but walk in customer shoes. And when you think about an organization like ours, with people, a B2B to C organization, where a lot of folks are interfacing with not the end customer, the end participant, we created an immersive experience for all of our associates, every single employee, to go through, that we called Client Forward. And it really started with a deep immersion around who our customers are, we have different types of customers we serve, a very emotional video-based journey that we took everybody on, with a lot of raw feelings, because again, this is a very emotional topic for people. That I think, first of all, I mean, we had employees in tears, just starting with what we call this customer tunnel of love, with
Mm.
all of this surround sound of people sharing their stories. And then we progressed into sharing, and frankly, just being very honest about, here are some of the things that we are not doing well today, and with respect to our client experience, which again, I think, employees so appreciate when leadership is willing to expose where there are gaps and issues.
Yeah.
And then moved into, okay, well, let's give you some examples of things we're doing to move that forward. And here's a future state provocation for what could be possible for inspiration. And so, all of that being said, I think getting folks in, creating that moment that hopefully gets a movement going, to get everybody anchored in why we're all here, and reminding everybody. And I think that is just so important. And we had employees who've been here for 20 years that
Mm.
had never really understood the participant before, right? And their experience. And this was a major, like, emotional connection, which I think is so important to drive client-centric behaviors. I think the other few more systemic, enduring things that we've been focused on, you mentioned this at the onset, but establishing clarity of the client health metrics. We have a few of them, not just this mission metric, but also things that are more operational, that the teams can see the impact of their work, that are measuring the client health, and is that going the right direction? So that has been a really important like focusing element for folks, and really self-reinforcing for teams that are working on solving customer problems to see that improve as a result of their work. The other thing, for us has been um, giving people the capabilities they needed. We have been working towards and now have a singular design system so that we can actually enable teams to create an end-to-end cohesive client experience. And maybe last thing I would say is, um, we have been really leaning into maturing our capabilities like experimentation, particularly in a digital context. You have to be a learn it all culture, not a know it all culture. And you've got to go out there and quickly get things to market instead of spend time internally navel gazing and debating. So it's been a real breakthrough for teams to be able to just, all right, let's go. We've got 3 different ideas. Let's go and test and go. And so I think that is helping us to also as more of a risk-averse type of a culture, given our roots in insurance and financial services and being a regulated business. It's helping give permission to teams to go and learn. And I think it's just so important when you think about being client-centric, because you can't possibly have all the answers, and you have to know and go and learn what different customers need.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things on that. I think when it comes to employees, sometimes they get so focused on their position, on their KPIs that they're hoping to achieve from that quarter from the annual perspective, that I call it the horse blinders, right? They got their head down, they're running as fast as they can in that direction to achieve their outcome. But
Mhm.
sometimes, like you said, walking in that customer's shoes, the love tunnel, I think you mentioned, I really enjoy that because some people don't know how this really impacts the customer. Like, what is that end result? And ultimately, it doesn't matter you know, how many Jessicas are between you and the customer. It always ends with the customer. And
Yep.
so, how do you have that customer in mind? A couple of questions that I always ask just employees in general is like, what makes you choose the company that you're at? Like, what is the personal reason, the professional reason that you're there? And there's all sorts of reasons, but then you can say like, now let's talk about the customer. Like, here's why the
Yep.
customer has chosen the organization that you work for. Um, and here's how you can make this collectively better. And ultimately, there's if you don't know, I had the opportunity to interview Jesse Cole. He is the founder of the Savannah Bananas, and that was a year or so ago. But one thing that he challenges his team to do is just get really uncomfortable. What are the things that sound absolutely ridiculous,
Mhm.
but that are potentially possible? Because it comes down to, can we control it? Can we do it and can we not? And like, what's controllable and what's not controllable? And he said, I've done a lot of things that just absolutely failed, but there were some crazy ideas that just might work.
Mhm.
Um, and so I even challenge organizations like your guys, like yourself, 100-year-old company could easily say, this is the way we've always done it. Like
Mhm.
it's always worked, right? You have this technical debt and we're never going to get out of this hole. Or you could have a different mindset and you could
Yeah.
change that experience and you could differentiate on the experience. You could have a customer-centric approach. And it sounds like that's what you guys are doing. So with all that being said, uh, I think that's awesome. And I think that, I look forward to learning more about what you guys are doing in the coming years. And I would encourage you guys to continue to double down on where you're at and focus on that love tunnel on both the employee and the customer side. Is there anything else that you hope that my listeners might want to know, or what's the best place for people can find you?
I think I'll just add on to your last point that you made around the challenging to get uncomfortable, and maybe a similar but slightly different frame that we have been applying to hopefully get to a similar outcome, which is this idea of just we're starting off with a problem space and then challenging a team to say, what is the 10x like most amazing experience you can imagine? Just describe something absurd. Like, it's absurd. You're solving this problem. What would this like
Yeah.
absurd thing be that for you, you have about a million objections and constraints and things in your mind that you don't ever believe it could be true. So
Mm.
it's the art of, suspending disbelief. Um, and you'd be surprised how difficult that is for people at first who, particularly have a lot of history and know where, all the bodies are buried and all the constraints are. It's tough to get out of that constraint-based thinking and why not, why we can't. So I love that approach as a way to give people the space to go and do that. And what usually comes out of that is eventually, and sometimes you got to push a little, well, what if is the leading question. When you get people to then envision that, you can actually work backwards from that, saying, all right, if that is what we wanted to do, what are the capabilities we'd need to
Mm.
start to move towards that? What do you think the objections are that we have to go overcome to allow us to do? You can work backwards. And I think what we've found in a couple cases where we've taken that to go activate is, in fact, 75% of the stuff you can do. You just have to convince yourself first you can.
Yeah.
And I love doing that because it gets people out of, like you said, the force blinders and sort of just staying in this lane, not through any bad intent, but just because of their reality day to day. So for me, that's a practice that I would highly recommend to anyone. And again,
Mm.
sometimes you have to have some people there that can coach and push, like, really, is that 10x better? Or did you just walk it back to what we already have? But once you
Yeah.
can do that, I think it's a really great way of getting teams to think innovatively.
Yeah, that's great. What's if somebody hears this episode and is like, I need to work with TIAA or I need to contact Jessica because she sounds pretty awesome. What's the best way to get in touch with you or just in general?
Sure. I mean, well, I'm on LinkedIn, so feel free to message me or reach out there, Jessica Austin Barker. And I won't give my cell phone out right now, but
Yeah.
feel free to do that. And then, of course, you can go visit the TIAA.org site if you want to check out more about what we do, and just learn more about our services. Go check it out there, and you can learn more about even lifetime income and what we mean by a retirement paycheck for life.
Yeah, that's great. And I'll make sure that your LinkedIn profile is in the show notes. And as always, it's a pleasure to connect with you and wishing you nothing but the best.
Thanks. And thanks for having me, Nick.